Far out in the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, hidden from the eyes of the world, lay a small, isolated island called Yucata. On the surface, it seemed like a paradise, crystal clear waters that shimmered in the sunlight, lush green forests alive with exotic birds, and tranquil beaches that stretched for miles. But behind this veil of beauty was a sinister reality, for Yucata was not a paradise, it was a prison. Over 300 women had been lured to this island, from different corners of the world. Some came from bustling cities, others from quiet rural villages. All were promised better lives, opportunities to escape poverty, to find work, or to start anew. But when they arrived, they realized they had been deceived. Instead of the freedom and hope they had been promised, they found themselves trapped on this island, held captive by a single man named Cato. Cato was a shadowy figure, a man whose wealth and power seemed boundless. He had built a private empire on Yucata, where his rule was absolute. For years, he had been trafficking women to the island, using false promises and ruthless manipulation to trap them. He treated the women as his property, and his guards ensured that no one ever left the island. Any attempts to escape were met with swift and brutal punishment. Among the women was Amina, a former school teacher from West Africa. She had been abducted while traveling to a neighboring country for work. Her hopes of earning money for her family cruelly shattered. But despite the horror of her situation, Amina refused to give in to despair. She had always been strong-willed, a leader by nature, and even in captivity, she held on to that strength. Another was Mia, a soft-spoken woman from the Philippines. Unlike Amina, Mia had been lured to Yucata by the promise of work in a hotel. She was quiet and observant, but she was no less determined to survive. Over the months, she had mapped out much of the island in her mind, learning the patterns of the guards and the locations of Cato's hideouts. She kept this knowledge to herself, waiting for the right moment. The days on Yucata were long and filled with fear. The women lived in small, cramped quarters, always under the watchful eyes of Cato's guards. They were forced to work in the island's gardens, preparing meals, and cleaning the luxurious buildings where Cato and his men lived. The women were forbidden to speak of escape, and anyone caught trying to organize resistance was punished harshly. But despite the fear and isolation, a bond began to form between the women. They shared their stories in secret whispers, supporting each other through the hardships they faced. Some had lost their families, others their homes, but together, they began to find strength. They were more than victims, they were survivors, and they began to realize that their only hope of freedom was in their unity. Amina, with her natural leadership, started to gather small groups of women late at night. She spoke to them about her plans to escape, about how they could fight back against Cato. At first, many were afraid, fearing the brutal reprisals they had seen others face. But Amina's words resonated. "We are not weak," she would say. "We are not what he tells us we are. We are stronger than him, and together, we can take our freedom." Mia, meanwhile, used her quiet nature to her advantage. She moved through the island unnoticed, gathering information about the guards and their routines. She had learned of a hidden dock on the far side of the island, where a boat was kept. It was small, but it could be their way out. Mia also discovered that Cato had left the island for a short time to attend to his operations abroad. This was their chance. With Amina's leadership and Mia's knowledge, the women began to prepare. They trained in secret, learning how to fight, how to navigate the island's treacherous jungles, and how to defend themselves. They crafted makeshift weapons from the tools they used for their daily work: garden tools, pieces of metal, and heavy stones. Over time, their resolve hardened. They were no longer afraid. They were ready. The day of their rebellion arrived on a stormy night. The winds howled, and rain lashed against the island's trees, drowning out the sounds of their movements. Under the cover of the storm, Amina led the women through the jungle, their faces set with determination. Mia guided them through the paths she had memorized, avoiding the guards and leading them toward the hidden dock. But just as they reached the dock, their plan took an unexpected turn. Cato, having returned early from his trip, stood waiting for them with his guards. He had learned of their plan through one of his spies, and now he intended to crush their rebellion. His men surrounded the women, weapons drawn, and for a moment, it seemed all hope was lost. But Amina would not be intimidated. She stepped forward, standing tall in front of Cato. "You think you own us," she said, her voice unwavering despite the fear she felt. "But you will never break us. We are more than what you see. We are mothers, daughters, sisters. We are stronger than you." Her words struck a chord with the women. One by one, They stood behind her, forming a line of defiance against Kato's men. The guards, who had always relied on the women's fear, hesitated. They had never faced such determined resistance. Kato shouted at them to attack, but Amina and her sisters were ready. The women fought with everything they had, armed with their makeshift weapons and the strength of their unity. They overwhelmed Kato's guards. Some of the guards, realizing the tide had turned, abandoned Kato and fled into the jungle. Others were captured by the women, bound and left behind as they made their way to the boat. Kato, once so powerful, was now at their mercy. Amina, looking into his eyes, saw nothing but a coward who had hidden behind his wealth and his cruelty. "This is your end," she said softly, turning her back on him as the women boarded the boat and sailed away from Yukata, leaving him behind to face his own demise. The journey across the ocean was long and difficult, but the women kept their spirits high. They had won their freedom, and nothing could take that away from them. When they were finally rescued by a passing ship, their story spread far and wide, a story of courage, unity, and resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship. As they sailed away from the island, Amina and Mia stood side by side, watching as Yukata disappeared into the horizon. They had survived, not because of one person's strength, but because they had come together, relying on each other's courage and will to escape. Their bond was unbreakable,